Hi, and welcome to this video on working with color. And in the previous video, working with light, we worked through the light folder from our action. And just to bring you up to speed, this was the original snapshot of the base image. And here's the snapshot we made after we'd finished making the light changes, and we ended up with some work on the scene, face, eyes and hair, and we actually introduced a second scene layer to make another change to the background. So we're now we're moving on to the next phase of the edit, which is the color section. And here, these, just to remind you that these layers were created by the action with the blend mode color, because here we're really just focusing on color, and to some extent we've worked on light, we've focused exclusively on light, and we now want to focus exclusively on color. Although it's fair to say it's difficult to sort of completely separate the two things. But it's a sort of separation of concerns which I find quite helpful. So now if we study our image, and again, one of the things that we can do, just for interest's sake, is we can just have a look at our histogram. And here I've selected the colors display. That's the RGB. But if I select colors, Photoshop shows me the sort of distribution of color in the image. And if I, for example, if I was to make a significant change to the red in my image, then you can see that the histogram's changed to show that's a sort of, well, it's a pretty dramatic increase in the red tones in the image. So the histogram may be useful to you in just sort of analyzing what's really going on in your image, and helping you to think about what's happening with the colors. But anyway, we'll just put that away for now. And so here I'm addressing colors in the scene. And to some extent, when I talk about scene, I suppose I almost could be called background, really. It's the color. I'm thinking about color across the whole image here. And we can see that we have this kind of, we're in kind of red and green land here a little bit, aren't we? We've got this sort of quite sort of reddish orangey tones on the right. We've got this in this bokeh area, we've got that sort of similar, it's the brick color, in fact, that we've got just this flash of sort of muted green on the garment she's wearing. So we could, for example, decide to just enhance the red. And here I'm just actually looking at the background here, and I'm just thinking about giving more sort of punch and impact to the background. And I'm just experimenting, really. I don't need to Could add a little bit of magenta, possibly. Not sure if I like that. Perhaps introduce a bit of blue to cool it down slightly. But again, to stress, it's not sort of terribly scientific process. We're just experimenting with color, just to sort of see what looks good, and we're thinking about. We're also thinking about making our image pop. So we're thinking about how to also about, as we discussed previously, about how to kind of use color to separate the model from the background and sort of make her pop and give her more impact. So we'll try that, and then we can, if we just work on the mask there with our black brush selected, we can choose an opacity which is going to sort of restore the original color of the subject, but also leave enough there to hopefully sort of blend her into the rest of the image. So if we just gently paint that on, and so we've restored a good deal of the original color on the subject, and we might decide to just do a few more strokes around the eyes just to bring that back around the eyes, and so now we can switch that off. We can review it. We can zero it out, and we can feed it back in to a point where we feel happy with it. I mean, to some extent, I suppose with this image we could say that this background is very sort of gritty and realistic, and perhaps we shouldn't. There's an argument for saying we shouldn't mess with the colours too much. But at the same time, we're also we're at the service of the model here, trying to give her more impact and give her more visual impact. So we might decide that that's too much, actually. So let's say we decide to leave that around 55. So effectively what we've done is change the color on the background. Now if I focus on the model's face, well, when we're thinking about color in relation to someone's face, we're obviously wise to try and sort of preserve the skin tones we've got, and we don't usually want to be too sort of brutal with color changes on the face, which is why I tend to, for my face layer in the color section, I just have a hue saturation layer, because I sometimes like to just sort of just gently reduce the saturation on the model's skin a little bit, which sometimes can you can have that kind of reddish look to it. So I'm going to try that here. and then I'm going to invert that. Select my white brush, and then I'm just going to paint some of that dropped saturation onto her skin, which I find it just kind of tones things down a little bit and helps give us a nice smooth effect to the skin. You have to be very wary of overdoing this, because if you desaturate the skin too much, you can get this kind of Night of the Living Dead sort of look, which isn't terribly attractive. But sometimes the skin color looks a little hot to me, and I like to just drop the opacity, the saturation a little bit. So let's try that. Let's just toggle that back on. Fairly subtle change, which we can drop back a little bit. Really changed it massively there, have we? But just a small enhancement. And we could just apply it to the other skin areas as well while we're doing that, in the interests of sort of equalization. So I think in terms of the subject's face in the color section, there probably isn't a huge amount we want to do usually. I mean, there might be a kind of minor adjustment we might like to make, but we probably don't want to do too much, because we're always really, particularly with a natural light portrait, we're trying to get a kind of fairly natural look for the skin on the face. So now let's look at eyes, and here we've raised the brightness of the eyes quite a bit. In fact, at this stage, it occurs to me that I would probably I can probably go further with that. So what I'm doing here is I'm actually dropping back into my light layer, and I'm just I feel that I can get away with making these eyes quite a little bit brighter. I could have just added this in the color section, since it's the way I'm thinking here is it's a change which supports the color change. But I suppose logically it belongs there, so I'm just going to call that eyes 2 and put that in the light section. Okay, now I'm going back to my I'm back in my color folder, and I'm going to look at eyes, where I have a hue saturation layer, and now I'm going to see what I can do in terms of boosting the saturation on the eyes. And although this looks pretty weird now, bear in mind I'm really only interested in her eyes here. So when I invert that, I'm now going to use my brush, and I'm going to zoom in quite a bit here. And I'm going to use my brush to paint this increased saturation onto the iris, and on the pupil as well, I think here. And this just, as you can see, has the effect of giving these the colour in the eye a bit more impact. And over here as well. I've got these stray hairs which are sort of in the way a bit, but just have to live with them for now. Quite difficult actually to clean up stray hairs which are going across the eye itself. But we're not going to worry about that at the moment. So as I pull back, if I toggle that off, it's a fairly subtle change which has just lifted the eyes a little bit. What I may also do here is add in a vibrance layer which will give me even more colour in my eyes, and we obviously don't want to get too carried away here, but this again, what I want to see is some real sort of impact there, and I know that subsequently I can drop it back. So I'm going to invert, and now I'm going to paint in my vibrance change onto my iris. I'm particularly interested in the iris itself. The pupil, often the colour changes don't make that much difference, to be honest, but I have this situation here where I have one eye which is quite well focused, and it's not quite so great, but hey ho. And so now I need to pull back, and I just need to obviously where we have this kind of alien look, it means we've overdone it, and so, but it's fine to sort of overdo it initially and then just dial it back in on the opacity to a point where it's helpful but doesn't look sort of crazy. And we can and so now we've given her eyes considerably more impact. We may feel that we've overdone it slightly. We may sort of reserve judgment till later on in the edit. We may feel, in fact, that what we should do is where we added this second layer where we boosted the eyes went back to the light folder and boosted the eyes. We may feel that that's the problem, that we've sort of we've overdone that a bit. So if we pull that back to somewhere in the 60s, let's say around there, that may make us happier. Okay, so obviously we can sort of carry on working on the eyes to our heart's content, but for now I'm hoping to just kind of illustrate to you the principle of what we do there. And the next thing is her hair. So we're now going to just look at the model's hair and see if we can enhance the color, and the sort of preset layer I have for hair is the vibrance layer, and I'm just going to try see what happens when I push that right up. Obviously it looks completely crazy. So what I want to do is just work with my vibrance layer until I get something that it gives me something that gives me that kind of sweet spot. I think I would describe it as a kind of sweet spot between impact and sort of subtlety, and not we don't want to destroy our image by sort of overdoing anything. So let's try that, and let's invert again, and of course once again let's drop opacity back so it's fairly in the middle 50s, and then I'm going to paint my vibrant hair onto just the area of the hair. And I can do this with hair. I tend to just sort of drop highlights in sometimes. I don't always, just sort of brush away at it. I tend to find it looks nice if we just sort of drop in and highlight particular parts of the hair. Here, this is obviously quite prominent in the image, so we want to affect this, just adjust opacity down a little bit perhaps here. And just move around the hair, adding in that additional vibrance, saturation. And then if we switch that off, you can see the effect that that's had, which is really just, it's kind of making a hair pop a little bit more. And once again, we can just sort of review that. We can zero it out and just feed it in. Perhaps if we feed it in and we settle on somewhere in the early 70s for that maybe. That's given her hair a little bit more sort of zing as well. Now at this point we can, as we did in the previous video about light, because we're working with a folder, we do have the ability to reduce opacity on all the changes in the folder. So we can, if we like, just zero out all our color changes. That's what we started with. That's where we are now. And we might decide that we'd like to perhaps compromise a little bit and just move just paying attention to her eyes again. What effect does that have on her eyes? We lose quite a bit of the eye color when we do that. So I'm just going to leave that at about 96, I think. And of course, as we did with the light folder, bear in mind that although the action gives us these sort of ready-made layers, but there's absolutely nothing at all to stop us from deciding to just insert another layer at any point in the proceedings. If we feel that a particular area needs more work, or it suddenly strikes us that we need to make something brighter or darker, or in the case of color, enhance color in some way, or back it off on another area of the screen. Also, now if we make a snapshot here, we could call that color changes, and now we can go back to the original image. We can see the effect on the image of the changes we made in the light section, light folder, part of the edit. And now we can see the changes we've made in the color section of the edit, and that is extremely useful in helping us to sort of judge whether we've done the right thing, or whether we feel that we've kind of overdone something or not done enough of something. And it may cause us to, there's really nothing to stop us, as it were, moving back and forth between the color and light, since they're so closely related. I mean, for example, it might strike me at this point that I want to give her even more impact, and I want to I'm doing this sort of fairly dramatic change here just to illustrate that it might appear to me that it's going to be better to really darken that background even more, and select my black brush, raise opacity, and then bring her face back. So that we have I suppose what I'm thinking here is I can decide at any point in the edit, I can decide to move back to an earlier stage and sort of say to myself, well, I think this would really be much better if this was, if the background was darker. And then again, I could drop that. I might decide to drop that back a little bit. And I might make another snapshot. And I might say that's color BG darker. And then I can compare that to this is what we had before, and our color changes snapshot, and here's what's happened. Now I've made it so much darker, and I might easily at that point, I might sort of think, well, okay, it's a good idea, but overdone. So I might decide to, I might feel that the effect of that is to cause her to stand out, but to stand out too much, so she looks sort of artificial in the scene. So I might pull that back. again, and as I've said before, it's really a question of trying to sort of strike this balance between getting an image that has a lot of impact for the viewer, and that's what we're looking for, to get our images noticed. And to get your images noticed, I think you do have to some extent aim for the sort of impact and the wow factor, but we're also careful to ensure that, as always, we don't destroy the original charm of the capture. So that's one approach to this image, and so we've been through our color section. We can easily make use of other color tools here if we want to. For example, if I wanted to go into color balance, add a color balance layer. If I wanted to just quickly see if I ought to make this more blue, perhaps not, more red, perhaps not, push a bit of cyan in. It's quite attractive. A little bit of cyan in the shadows there, maybe. That's quite nice. Or I can, of course, the other thing is the levels tool, where I can use levels to, if I want to push blue in the mids or take some out of the mids. So Photoshop has plenty of tools for working with color, and I tend to use curves a lot, but sort of color balance and levels are equally useful. It just depends on what you prefer. So there's the color balance change. Levels we didn't really do a whole lot with, but just to sort of draw to your attention the fact that these other ways of working with color. And so that's it, really. Just to review once more, as our original image now seems incredibly bright. The background seems incredibly bright in relation to the model. And that's often an aspect of these sort of natural light images, because we can't really expose the model differently to the background. It's quite a common situation that we have good light across the image, but the distribution of light doesn't particularly favor our subject. That was the light changes we made, snapshot. This was the original color changes. And when we switch that on, you can see her eyes kind of light up there. Let's bring that in a bit closer. We see that. That's the light changes. That's the color change, lighting up her eyes. And this is where we made a kind of second pass on color and decided to make the background quite a bit darker. And I think that was that one, wasn't it? And I now feel we should pull that back a little bit. So, once again, we're always sort of making changes, tweaking them, going back, kind of reviewing what we've done. And as one thing that you'll notice as we're getting closer now to actually working through a complete edit, one of the important things, of course, is the way that all these various changes sort of balance and blend together across the whole edit. So it is something that happens quite a lot, is that, as we go forward, we may make a change which causes us to review a previous change, and we might go back and tweak something that we've already done, and that's just part of the edit process. Okay, so that's it for now, and thanks for following along with this video about making color changes to the image, and I hope you've enjoyed it, and I look forward to talking to you on the next video.